So this is getting a little bit of a controversy on Twitter. People are pointing out that on Steam, the new Silent Hill F game is having a trigger warning. It says that this game may contain. I don't really understand the expression, like may contain. Like, does it contain or doesn't it? Why can't you be sure? Like, who wrote this? Did you not play the game? Do you not know? But anyway, may contain content that's not appropriate for all ages or may not be appropriate for viewing at work. Holy shit. Who the fuck plays Silent Hill at work? Like, that should be the problem, right? Like, you're hired to do a job and the person pays you money so you can play video games. This game contains depiction of gender discrimination. Holy shit. Child abuse. Goodness gracious. Bullying. Drug-induced hallucination, torture, graphic violence. Well, I hope it does, because it's a horror game, right? Like, it's meant to horrify people, and the stuff that you enlisted so far is pretty horrifying shit. So, like, yeah. I mean, how can you make a horror game without including horrifying themes, right? This game is set in Japan in the 1960s. And contains depictions based off the costumes and the culture at the time. I love how it explains, like, it's a moron reading it, right? So, like, it's a perpetually offended moron. And it's like, look. Like, I know these things offend you, but, like, you gotta understand it took place in the past, right? These depictions do not reflect the opinions or values of developers, right? Because, like, this is what you would think. It's like, if they make a fictional horror game, like if they make a slasher movie, this is like reflecting on what they are. Like, they genuinely want Freddy Krueger to butcher young people. Like, this is why the filmmakers are making that film. Like, George R.R. Martin legitimately likes incest, because why else would he write it? And anyway, if you feel uncomfortable at any point playing, please take a break from playing or speak to someone you trust. It's like, who do you speak? It's like, okay, so I played Silent Hill, and I saw something there that made me uncomfortable. I want to see how that conversation goes. Like, I want to see how that individual, like, speaks with someone of something like this. Like, I played a video game, and in that video game, there was something that... I'm literally shaking right now. I'm literally shaking. Okay, now I'll explain to you why this is included and why they have to include it, right? Like, first of all, when I was born, I was born in a generation of superhumans. Like, maybe because Chernobyl exploded, but like, my generation had the capacity of differentiating fact from fiction. I don't think they make human beings like me anymore. I don't think that the new generation is capable of doing this. I don't know why. Maybe it's something in the water. Maybe RFK will fix it. But the reality is, like, people are like children now. They generally don't understand that this is fiction and this is reality. And so when I was playing these types of games, right, like, I understood it's a horror game. And I knew that, of course, it's going to have, like, disturbing themes in it to create the horror. And the interesting thing is, like, I never dwelt on these issues. Like, for instance, when I was watching Dragon Ball, and there's, like, fan service with Bulma. Like, not for a second would I even think, oh, she's underage. Like, no, like, Bulma was a fictional character from a fictional universe. And the fan service with her, like, lifting her skirt and Mount Roshi having his nosebleed was just, like, part of a comedic effect, right? Or when you watch South Park and the aliens probe Cartman's ass. Not for a second would I even think, oh, Cartman is an actual child. Like he was just a stylized character in a fiction. So, like, I wouldn't dwell on that, right? But when you put the trigger warnings and you're going out of the way to highlight that, oh, now I'm actually thinking of it. Thank you very much. Now I can't enjoy the stuff as much as I used to before. But the other interesting thing is, like, people are treating now art as a Rorschach test, right? So basically, like, the creators of South Park must be some of the most fucked up people in the head, because, like, they made stuff, you know, like if we actually apply it as a Rorschach test, they must be some very unhinged individuals, right? Because, like, South Park has everything wrong under the sun. But the reason it has it is because it's supposed to be edgy. It's supposed to be offensive. Like, that is literally the fucking point. But apparently not, right? Like, apparently South Park has been grandfathered in, so it gets a pass. But everything else that's being made now doesn't get a pass. Like, everything else that's being made now is hyper-scrutinized. And I do think, like, in the future, the new generation is going to get fed up with the shit from our generation. And they're going to be like, fuck you guys, we're mortal decoupling. And then you're actually going to see some really nasty art. Like, then you're actually going to see some of the most disturbing art ever made. Because it's just how it goes, you know? Like, when you try to repress things, it's like pressing on your thumb on a spring. And when you remove the thumb, the spring jumps back up. It happened throughout human history. It will happen again. But again, like, the thing is, like, many of these disclaimers are being forced by Steam. And Steam probably does it because of different legislations from different countries, right? Like, they have to abide by it. And, you know, it all started with the ESRB, which, by the way, I think it's a good thing, right? Like, there is indeed certain content in fiction that I don't think children should be able to see it, right? So, like, for instance, extreme violence. I don't think, like, a 5-year-old should see extreme violence because children try to reproduce things. It's not that it traumatizes them, because I grew up with horror movies, but there were kids dumber than me that see something on TV and then they try to reproduce it in real life, someone gets hurt, right? And so, like, you shouldn't have 6-year-olds watching Silent Hill. I get that, right? But then you have teenagers. Like, teenagers are a lot more enlightened. They understand a lot more. And so, like, hyper-violence for a teenager is fine, right? Like, a teenager that's 16 should be able to play something like Silent Hill. But they shouldn't actually have access to explicit stuff, right? So, like, if you have, like, genuine hardcore pornography, that's for adults, right? So that's where the ESRB comes in. Like, it separates between E for everyone, right? Then it has, like, teenagers. Then it has, like, adults and adults only. But that apparently is not enough, because the moral busybody has to constantly moralize, right? Like, if there's nothing to moralize, then what is the moral busybody? He's useless. He doesn't want to be useless. So he needs to constantly justify the grift and constantly moralize it. The ESRB is now not enough. Like, they also need to specify everything that happens in fiction, right? Like, give trigger warnings, basically. And the problem with trigger warnings is that if you have, like, a game that is, like, 40 hours, right? And in that game, you have, like, a single scene where someone does drugs. Like, for 5 seconds, you have someone doing it. Now you have to put it in a disclaimer, right? So now you have, like, this game contains drug abuse. But it's, like, you know, like, one scene out of 40 hours. And so it looks bad, right? Like, it looks really bad. If you have, like, a 200 hours games where a lot of things happen, you end up with a sausage like this. And the problem is, like, it looks bad itself, right? Because, again, it makes the developers seem unhinged. So, like, the developers have to justify and explain. It's like, wait, hold on a little bit. We're not glorifying it. Like, we're trying to make a horror game. And in the horror game, we have horror themes. Take Game of Thrones, for instance, right? Like, Game of Thrones has incest in it. It has child abuse. It even, like the book, right? Song of Ice and Fire, the popular book that went around the world. It has CSAM, they call it now. They don't call it CP anymore. I don't know why they changed the name, but like, I think like CP sounds a lot more damning, right? But like CSAM sounds very corporate, sanitized. But yeah, like Game of Thrones has that, right? Like some of the characters there are underage. Like for instance, there's a girl that looks like Arya Stark, and Ramsay Snow marries her in order to get legitimacy over Winterfell. But because she's an imposter, she's not a noble, he doesn't want to consummate the wedding with her, so he gets his dogs to do it while Rick watches. Like, that's in the books, right? That's in A Song of Ice and Fire, popular bestseller. Imagine if they forced that disclaimer, right? Like, how would it look like on the cover of the book if they forced that disclaimer? And that's a scene that happens, you know, like in several volumes. Like we're talking about tens of thousands of pages. And it's like just one scene. Which, you know, like, sure, I guess like it could be taken out. But the purpose of the scene is to show just what a mental case Ramsay Snow is to get the reader to absolutely despise this villainous character. Which is like completely unhinged, worse than Joffrey and all of that. And so the payoff when Ramsay Snow finally dies exists in the reader, like after all, you see all the harm he does, you know, and finally he gets his comeuppance. It is very satisfying. It's a writer's tool, basically, right? It's not a Rorschach test. Like, if you read Game of Thrones, it doesn't make you a bad person, right? I don't think George R.R. Martin is a sick person. I think, like, this is just like a plot device in order to make the characters interesting. And this is why it's a best-selling book. This is why people like it. Not because of that scene, but, like, if we were to sanitize Game of Thrones and then, like, make sure that everything is on the up and up, then you get what you get on the TV, right? With the last 3 seasons. That's Game of Thrones sanitized. And this is the problem with censorship. Like, it makes boring art. It makes it bland. It makes it uninteresting. And then everyone is shocked when people like anime. Well, why do they like anime? Because, you know, the American TV shows were far better than anime, but then they decided to sanitize them. And Game of Thrones is the perfect example. Like, we know that the producers were getting criticism that there's too many tits in the game, that there's rape, that there's misogyny. And so they decided to cut down on that and sanitize it. And once they sanitize it, well, we know the results. And so, yeah, this is why you get this sausage here, which, again, like, I don't know how you can make a horror game that's a psychological horror and you're supposed to get the player to feel disturbed without adding disturbing themes. And then you can say, well, yeah, but, like, can we not add these themes? I mean, yeah, sure, but, like, where do you stop? Like, why don't you just allow the developer to create whatever the fuck they want, especially when it's a series of world renown? Like, they seem to know what they're doing, right? Just leave them the fuck alone. As for the disclaimers, they will keep happening because, again, there are legislations in certain countries, usually from the Anglosphere, almost all of them, that force these types of disclaimers to exist. And so if you want to publish your game on Steam, you have to disclaim it. And if you disclaim it, again, it looks awful, so the developers have to explain why they included those particular themes, and you end up with this sausage fest. Let me know what you think, and I'll see you guys in the comment section. Take care.